I never thought refilling a glass of sparkling cider would break my heart. But there I was, standing behind the swinging doors of the banquet hall's kitchen, the soft clatter of dishes behind me, the muffled sounds of wedding laughter beyond. I'd only stepped away for a moment. My dress itched at the collar, my heels pinched. I was about to pour myself a drink when I heard it. "She's just a pathetic failure. Nothing like you." Natalie's voice. My daughter. She was speaking to her new mother-in-law, Mrs. Whitmore, a woman with diamond earrings and a face polished by money. They were both laughing, quietly, intimately. Pathetic failure. I didn't even breathe. I stood frozen, hand clenched around the glass, afraid it might shatter in my grip. She was talking about me. I knew that tone, that careful cruelty disguised as charm. I'd taught her better. God knows I did. I had raised her alone. After her father died, I scrubbed motel floors during the day and took night shifts at the diner. I sewed her costumes by hand, ironed her graduation gown until it gleamed. I ate leftovers so she could have the first bite of anything fresh. And now, a pathetic failure. The applause began outside, signaling the start of the wedding toast. My cue to return. I didn't move. From the other side of the door, I heard the clink of glasses, chairs scraping, silverware tapping. A celebration I had paid for in part. Not just with money, but with years of sacrifice. Natalie had once said she wanted me front and center on her wedding day. Apparently, she'd changed her mind. I blinked hard, willing the tears to stay down. I wouldn't give her that, not today. Not in front of them. As I stood there, I saw a reflection in the chrome refrigerator door across the kitchen, a tired woman in a soft lavender dress, one she'd bought secondhand and altered herself. A woman who had been both mother and father, who had built a life out of scraps, and still showed up smiling. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me, but I respected her. Maybe Natalie didn't. Maybe no one else in that ballroom ever would. But I did. I took a breath. Fixed my lipstick in the small compact I kept in my purse. I straightened my shoulders and stepped forward. No one saw me wipe my eyes before walking back into the hall. But they would hear me soon enough. Because what Natalie didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had something in my purse that would speak louder than her cruel little laugh. Her father's final message, and when the time was right, I'd let him speak. I slipped out through a side hallway, dimly lit, quiet, far from the music and laughter. My footsteps echoed softly on the polished floor, the kind of hallway meant for staff, not guests. But I needed silence, space, air. I leaned against the wall, the cold plaster grounding me. My hands trembled slightly, the glass still in my grip. I'd meant to refill it. I hadn't. "She's just a pathetic failure." The words looped in my head like a cruel lullaby. Each repetition cut deeper. I stared at the wall in front of me and tried to breathe, but everything inside me ached. I'd heard Natalie say hurtful things before, dismissive tones, ungrateful comments, impatient sighs, but nothing like this. This was different, deliberate, cold, and she said it with ease. With a smile. Had she always thought that of me? It was strange how one sentence could suddenly recast a lifetime. Every birthday party I planned on a waitress's wages, every dance recital I walked in the rain, every night I stayed up sewing hems or heating soup or waiting for her to come home, it all twisted into something uninvited, unwanted. A failure. I had spent so long excusing her distance. She's just busy, I'd tell myself. She's ambitious. It's hard to be close when you live far. But she wasn't far. She was right there, in that ballroom, standing beside the man I helped raise from the grave. Because when David died, Natalie wasn't just left fatherless. She was left with a grieving mother who still made it to every parent-teacher conference, who still cooked 3 meals a day, who still tucked her in and sang old Spanish lullabies she pretended not to like. And now, on her wedding day, this was who I was to her. I slid down the wall, knees bent, careful not to wrinkle my dress. I didn't want pity, but I couldn't stop the sting in my eyes. Couldn't stop hearing that sentence in her voice. I didn't want to go back in. I considered leaving, quietly, Slipping out the back, calling a cab, disappearing before dessert. Maybe they wouldn't notice. Maybe they'd be relieved. But then, why did I come? I had promised myself I would see her married. I had pictured the moment so many times, walking her down the aisle myself, maybe even saying a few words about David, handing over a locket or a letter or something sentimental like in the movies. But she didn't ask for any of that. She didn't even ask me to speak. And still, I had come. With heels on. With hope in my chest. Now I wasn't sure what was left. Only one thing was certain. I would not let that be the last word. Not today. Not ever. The hallway blurred, replaced by memory. Suddenly I was in our old living room again, sunlight coming through the lace curtains David loved, the smell of lemon polish in the air. Natalie was 15. I had just come home from my second shift, hands sore, back aching. She was on the floor, surrounded by textbooks and junk food wrappers. That night, I took off my wedding ring. I didn't want to. I'd worn it even after David died, like it kept him close somehow. But the college bookstore bill had come in early, and the Pell Grant hadn't cleared yet. I remember standing over the sink, twisting that little band of gold, whispering an apology to him. I sold it the next morning. Got just enough to cover her chemistry books. She never knew. That same week, I found the birthday message David had recorded for her, his voice shaky but determined, recorded the night before he died. I remember listening to it in the dark, curled around a pillow, crying quietly so she wouldn't hear. He called her his brightest light. He said, "Never forget where you come from." I never gave it to her. I told myself she was too young. Then, later, too busy. Then, maybe, too angry. Or maybe I was afraid she'd listen and not care. But I kept it, wrapped in velvet, hidden at the back of my drawer. A voice frozen in time. A gift unopened. And now I wondered, had I waited too long? Maybe that's why her words hit so hard. Because they weren't just dismissing me. They were erasing him too. Erasing everything we built. Every scar we wore. Every little thing we did to make sure she had more than we ever did. She's just a pathetic failure. That wasn't just cruelty. It was revision. As if love could be rewritten by wealth. As if struggle made us small instead of strong. I wiped my cheeks with the hem of my dress and looked down at my hands, calloused, lined, a little arthritic now. They didn't look like a failure's hands. They looked like hands that had built a life. No, I wouldn't disappear. She could forget. She could pretend. But I couldn't let the story end there. David's voice was still waiting. A truth she hadn't heard. And suddenly, I knew, I wouldn't keep it from her anymore. Not to punish her. Not to shame her. But to remind her. Where she came from. Who she came from. And what real love sounded like. I stepped out into the garden behind the hall. It was late afternoon now, and the shadows were long, stretching across the hedges like thin fingers. The air was crisp, cool enough to calm my racing thoughts. I found a bench tucked under a tree and sat down, the weight of everything folding over me like a coat I couldn't take off. That's when I heard her voice. "Is this where the real party is?" Patty. I hadn't even noticed her come outside. She was still wearing that blue dress she loved, the one with the tiny embroidered flowers along the sleeves. Her heels dangled from her fingers, and her silver hair caught the light like frost. "I've been looking all over for you," she said, sitting beside me. "They're about to cut the cake." I didn't answer right away. I was still trying to breathe like none of it mattered. Like I hadn't just heard my only daughter call me a failure. But Patty had known me since before Natalie was born. She didn't need words. "What happened?" she asked softly. So I told her. Every word. From the laugh behind the kitchen door to the look on Natalie's face when she said it. I didn't even cry, I just talked. Like if I said it all out loud, it might make sense somehow. When I finished, Patty didn't rush to console me. She didn't gasp or get angry or tell me Natalie didn't mean it. She just sat in silence, watching a butterfly flutter past. Then she turned to me and said, "You still have that message, right?" I blinked. "What?" "David's message," she said. "You still have it." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do." She leaned forward, eyes sharp now, the same way they were when we used to sneak out of nursing school to smoke behind the cafeteria. Well, she said, maybe it's time she hears it. The words landed heavy. I looked away. I don't want to ruin her day. Patty snorted. Honey, she ruined it the second she erased you from it. That made me pause. She reached for my hand, her grip firm. This doesn't have to be revenge. It can be remembrance. I didn't answer. Not yet. But something shifted inside me. A flicker, like a match catching. Not rage. Not pride. Purpose. Because maybe this wasn't about me anymore. Maybe it was about the voice she'd forgotten. The man who gave her life, and the woman who kept it going. If she wouldn't hear it from me, maybe she'd listen to him. And suddenly, I knew exactly where I'd left that recorder. Part 5, his voice, still waiting summary. I find the recorder, still holding David's words, and wonder if it's finally time to press play. Word count. 559. Back inside the bridal suite, the air smelled faintly of perfume and hairspray. The room had been quieted by the chaos of the reception, abandoned for the moment in favor of champagne flutes and centerpieces. I opened my purse carefully, trying not to wrinkle the small handkerchief tucked inside, the one embroidered with David's initials. And there it was, a small velvet pouch, tucked in the side pocket. I reached in, fingers trembling just a little, and pulled out the recorder. It was old, scratched from years of moving drawers, but intact. The battery light blinked green, miraculously still charged. I pressed play. David's voice filled the room. It had aged in my memory, deeper now, more distant, but still him. Still warm, still grounded in that calm strength he always carried. My eyes blurred almost instantly. Natalie, he began, if you're hearing this, I guess I'm already gone. But that's okay. Because I'm with you in more ways than you'll ever know. He paused, his breath a little ragged, like he knew time was short. I want you to know something. Your mom, she's everything I ever dreamed for you. She's fierce, and brave, and full of a love so big, it'll hold you through anything. If you ever feel lost, remember where you come from. Remember her. A sob caught in my throat. She's my brightest light, he said softly. And so are you. I stopped the tape, sat in silence. His words wrapped around me like a blanket, too heavy for comfort, too sacred to set down. I looked at the door. Beyond it, the music was louder now. A conga line, maybe. Laughter rose and fell in waves. I held the recorder in both hands, thumb brushing the play button. Should I? I didn't want to ruin her wedding. I wasn't here to make a scene. I didn't need the spotlight. I didn't want applause. But I also didn't want her to forget him. Or me. There had been a time when I thought this message would be too much for her, too raw, too sad. I'd waited because I thought love meant protecting her from grief. But now I realized, love also meant telling the truth. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. And tonight, before that ballroom full of strangers, I might finally let him speak. Not to shame her, but to remind her she came from more than fine china and country clubs. She came from fire. And she came from us. I slipped away again, this time into the lounge beside the restroom, the one with the pale blue sofa and the 2 white lamps. The air was cool. Still, I sat down slowly and dialed Ruth. She couldn't come to the wedding. Her arthritis had been acting up, and the flight was too much. But I needed her now more than ever. She answered on the 3rd ring. Dulce? Her voice was soft but alert. She always could hear things in my voice that no one else noticed. I'm okay, I said, though it wasn't true. A beat of silence. Then, what happened? So I told her. I told her everything, Natalie's words, the recorder, the garden talk with Patty. All of it. I didn't cry this time. I think I'd cried everything out earlier. When I finished, Ruth didn't jump in with outrage. She didn't curse Natalie's name or tell me to go storming in like a soap opera heroine. She just asked one quiet question. If Natalie wants to erase you from her story, maybe it's time you remind her who wrote the first chapters. I closed my eyes. You think I should play it? I think, Ruth said gently, that this isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. Those words settled over me like warm cloth. I don't want to hurt her, I whispered. You won't, she said. David won't. But truth has weight, Dulce. And sometimes the people who floated too far need to feel the pull of it again. That stayed with me. I thought about Natalie as a little girl, how she used to climb into my lap with books too big for her arms. How she'd ask questions about her dad that I never had the right words to answer. How she'd cling to my waist at school drop-off, not wanting me to leave. She hadn't always been like this. There was love once. Deep, real, messy love. Somewhere along the way, we lost our footing. Maybe hearing his voice would bring her back. I don't want to ruin her day, I said again, half to myself. But maybe, Ruth said, you're not ruining it. Maybe you're saving it from being built on a lie. The line went quiet, just the faint sound of a clock ticking in her house. Then she added one last thing. She'll remember this moment for the rest of her life, Dulce. Make sure she remembers who loved her first. And just like that, the decision wasn't so heavy anymore. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't accuse. I would simply press play. And let her father speak for both of us. I made my way to the DJ's booth, tucked into the far corner of the ballroom, past the dessert table and the long row of wine glasses. The lights had dimmed slightly, casting everything in that golden wedding glow, the kind that made you feel like a guest in someone else's movie. I waited until the DJ finished fading out a love song. Excuse me, I said quietly. He looked up, young, polite, with big headphones hanging around his neck. Yes, ma'am? I held up the recorder, still wrapped in its velvet pouch. I know this is unusual, but I was wondering if you could play something for me. He blinked. Like, right now? No, I said. Later. Just for a minute. It won't interrupt anything. It's a message. From her father. That word. Father. It shifted his expression immediately. His posture straightened, and something softened in his eyes. I understand, he said. Was he? He passed when she was a girl, I explained. But he left something behind. I'd like her to hear it. He hesitated, glancing at the laptop in front of him. They gave me a pretty tight schedule. I won't take more than a minute, I promised. And I'm not trying to cause a scene. I just think, she needs to remember. He looked down, then back at me. Does she know you're playing it? No. Will she be okay with it? I gave the only answer I could. I don't know. But it's not cruel. It's not an ambush. It's just her dad, telling her he loved her. Telling her, who I am. That made his shoulders drop a little. He reached for a small auxiliary cable and held it up. If you give it to me before the open mic toasts, I can slide it in. I nodded, my breath catching in my throat. Thank you. He gave a small smile. Everyone deserves to be reminded where they came from. I turned away then, gripping the recorder tighter, heart racing. Outside, the party roared on, glasses clinking, laughter rising, the sound of forks against plates. Everyone was celebrating, but I was preparing, not to ruin a wedding, to restore something sacred, one voice, 1 minute, and if that didn't change anything, at least it would be the truth, finally spoken out loud. I took my seat again at the edge of the main table, far enough to be invisible, close enough to feel everything. The ballroom lights dimmed, soft piano music played under the clink of glasses as people quieted. It was time for the bride's toast. Natalie stood, elegant in her lace gown, the one I helped pick out. She looked radiant, at least on the outside. She smiled at the crowd. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. This has been the happiest day of my life. Applause. Laughter. A few whistles. She continued, eyes shining. I feel so lucky to be surrounded by people who have lifted me up, inspired me, and made me who I am. I waited. I want to thank Mrs. Whitmore, who's shown me what real grace and strength look like. More applause. I stared at the tablecloth. My hands rested on the recorder in my lap. Natalie kept going. To my in-laws, for welcoming me like a daughter. To my friends, who have seen me through every heartbreak and joy. Nothing. Not my name. Not a glance in my direction. And to my new family, she said, raising her glass toward the Whitmores, Thank you for making me feel like I finally belong." My chest tightened. There it was. Not just the omission, but the declaration. Like I had never existed. Like I had never bandaged scraped knees or worked double shifts or missed rent to pay for her violin lessons. Like I wasn't the reason she had made it to that ballroom in the first place. She toasted her real family. I didn't cry. I just blinked. Slowly. Patty, beside me, reached over and squeezed my hand. Her grip said what words couldn't. I looked down at the recorder again. I hadn't moved. Not yet. Let her have her moment. Let her think this was her story to rewrite. Because my turn was coming. And I wouldn't say a word to defend myself. I wouldn't list the sacrifices. I wouldn't drag out the receipts. I wouldn't beg to be seen. No, I'd let someone else speak. Someone whose voice she couldn't twist or dismiss. Her father. The man she'd built her heart on, the one person who could still reach her from beyond all this bitterness. And when that time came, she would hear him. And maybe, just maybe, remember me. I stayed in my seat after Natalie's toast, hands still resting on the recorder. My fingers no longer trembled. If anything, I felt still, too still. The kind of stillness you only feel right before a storm. Across the table, the waiters were clearing plates and refilling wine. People laughed, chatted, clinked forks against dessert. No one noticed me, except Patty. She leaned closer and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded. "I'm just waiting for open toasts." She gave a small smile. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." And I was. Not angry. Not even heartbroken anymore. Just ready. I glanced around the ballroom, the chandelier above, the roses on every table, the glittering name cards. So much beauty. So much careful performance. And beneath it, a silence no one else could hear. I looked down at my napkin and began quietly rehearsing. Not a speech. Not even a story. Just a sentence or two. Simple. Quiet. I'm not here to make a scene. I just want to share something Natalie's father left behind. Something he meant for her. That would be enough. No accusations. No bitterness. Just truth. And him. His voice. His words. I could already hear them echoing in the room, soft but powerful. A ghost of love. A reminder. A homecoming. I reached into my purse and pulled the recorder out just far enough to see the battery light. Still green. Still waiting. Across the room, someone laughed loudly. A bridesmaid was dancing barefoot. A cousin held up a bottle like a trophy. And Natalie, my Natalie, was smiling. Laughing. Turning her back to me. It didn't sting like it had earlier. Because I wasn't here to fight for a seat at her table anymore. I was here to remember who I was. And who she used to be. I tucked the recorder gently back into its pouch, then placed it on the table in front of me like a folded flag. Patty looked at me, brows raised. "You really going to do it?" "I'm not doing it to her," I said. "I'm doing it for her." She nodded. The music changed again, something slower now, the kind of song they play before speeches. The DJ stood and adjusted the mic. "Open floor is now available for anyone who wants to say a few words to the happy couple." People clapped. Someone shouted, "Keep it short." I stood. I didn't look at Natalie. Not yet. I just walked slowly toward the mic, the recorder tucked in my hand, my heart steady. This wasn't revenge. This was remembrance. And maybe, just maybe, redemption. The mic felt heavier than I expected. Funny, the things you notice when your heart is pounding. The room quieted as I stood at the center of the dance floor. Dozens of faces turned toward me, some curious, some confused. Natalie didn't even glance up. She was still talking to Mrs. Whitmore, sipping champagne like the night belonged to her alone. I cleared my throat. "I'm not great at speeches," I began. But I didn't want the night to pass without saying something. That got a few polite smiles. The kind people give when they expect you to be brief, bland, and forgettable. I looked at Natalie then. She still wasn't watching, so I kept going. "I'm not standing here as the mother of the bride tonight." That made her head lift. Slowly. "I'm standing here as David's widow." And just like that, the room shifted. Even the music faded lower, like the DJ knew instinctively. This was different. I saw a cousin straighten in his chair. An uncle paused mid-bite. People glanced around, as if realizing they'd missed something. I held up the small velvet pouch. Before he passed, David recorded a message for Natalie. I've kept it for years. Thought I'd wait for the right time. I looked straight at my daughter now. I think tonight is that time. Her eyes widened. Her smile vanished. She opened her mouth, maybe to stop me, maybe to speak. But nothing came out, and I wasn't going to wait. I handed the recorder to the DJ. Just press play. He nodded, took it gently like it was sacred. Then he dimmed the lights. And David's voice filled the room. I stepped back from the mic and returned to my seat as the first words echoed through the hall. Natalie, if you're hearing this, I'm already gone. But that's okay. Because I'm with you. Always. Gasps. A hush so deep you could hear the breath catch in people's throats. And Natalie, my daughter, sat frozen in her chair, eyes locked on the speakers, champagne glass trembling in her hand. She didn't cry. Not yet. She didn't speak. She just listened. And for the first time all evening, the room didn't see me as background noise. They saw me. They saw us. The ballroom had never been so still. Even the waitstaff froze where they stood, one waiter holding a tray of half-filled champagne flutes midair. No laughter. No whispers. Just the voice of a man long gone, speaking as if he were still in the room. David's voice cracked slightly as he said, Natalie, if you're hearing this, then your mom is sitting there. And she's being too modest about everything she's done for you. A few heads turned to look at me. I didn't flinch. She's given you everything, he continued. Not just the big things, your school, your home, but the quiet things, too. Her time, her health, her hope. Someone sniffled near the back. She's everything I ever hoped you'd become. I saw Natalie's lip tremble. She's brave, David said, and fierce when it matters, and kinder than she ever admits. You may not always understand her now, but one day, you'll see. A pause. And when that day comes, I hope you tell her thank you. Because I won't be able to. Silence. Dead, heavy silence. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum with his voice. Then, click. The recording ended. The DJ didn't speak. He just set the recorder down gently and stepped back, like handling something holy. All eyes were on Natalie. She didn't move. Her fingers were pressed to her lips, her shoulders shaking ever so slightly. And for the first time since the ceremony began, she looked like my daughter again. Not the polished bride, not the cold stranger from the kitchen. Just Natalie, a girl whose father had just spoken to her from the grave. She didn't say anything, didn't stand, didn't rush toward me, but she didn't look away either. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. And that was enough, for now. Because sometimes grief opens a door pride keeps shut. I sat back in my chair, Patty's hand resting lightly on mine, and let the silence do the work. David had said more in 1 minute than I could have in 1,000. And there it was, the truth, unpolished, undeniable, spoken by the one voice she couldn't ignore. Her father's. After the recording ended, there was no applause. No forced smiles. Just a hush that hovered over the room like fog. Then slowly, quietly, people began to stand. One by one, they approached me. Some just nodded. Others whispered, thank you. A few hugged me. No one mentioned the word failure. But Natalie, she was gone. I didn't see her leave. She must have slipped out as soon as the last word faded from the speakers. No scene, no confrontation. Just absence. Maybe it was shame. Maybe anger. Maybe she didn't even know what she was feeling. But I did. And I wasn't going to chase her. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a second velvet pouch, this one larger, softer. Inside was a sealed envelope. I had written the letter the night David died. I never knew when I'd give it to her. Maybe her 18th birthday. Maybe graduation. But those moments passed, and I always told myself, she's not ready. And maybe I wasn't either. Now, though? Now it didn't feel like a choice. Patty and I walked to the bridal suite where Natalie had been getting ready earlier. The door was cracked open. Her bouquet still rested on the vanity, already wilting at the edges. I placed the envelope gently on the table beside it. Inside, she'd find a letter from me, no anger, no judgment, just memories. Photographs of the apartment where we lived after David passed. Receipts for her schoolbooks. A copy of the deed to the old house I sold so she could afford out-of-state tuition. And at the end, a note that read, "Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it sounds like footsteps down the hall after a night shift. Like a lunchbox packed at 5 a.m. Like a mother who stayed, even when you didn't want her to." I closed the door without looking back. "Back in the hallway," Patty said, "You okay?" I nodded. I didn't say everything I wanted. But I left what mattered. She squeezed my arm. "Good." As we stepped outside into the cool night air, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't even feel victorious. I felt done. Not in a bitter way. In a way that meant I had nothing left to prove. No more truths to carry alone. No more love hidden away in drawers and velvet pouches. If Natalie wanted to rebuild something after this, she'd have to come to me. If not, at least now she knew the weight of the story she tried to rewrite. And who paid for every chapter. 2 days later, I was back home, folding laundry that had sat in the basket since the wedding. The house was quiet, peaceful. Then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something nudged me to pick up. "Hello? Mrs. Rivera?" a woman asked gently. "This is Eleanor Whitmore, Natalie's, well, her mother-in-law." I stiffened. "Yes, I remember." A pause. Then, softly, "I wanted to tell you. I had no idea what you've done for her." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She exhaled. "I saw your letter. Natalie left it on the dresser, unsealed. I read it. For a moment, I said nothing." "I hope that wasn't a violation," she said quickly. After hearing that message from her father, I had questions." I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. "She always said you were cold," Eleanor whispered. "That you were distant. That after her father died, you became detached. Bitter." The words hit like soft punches. Not because they were new, but because I realized now, they weren't just private thoughts. They were stories she had been telling. To her husband, to his family, to everyone. She told us you didn't support her dreams. That you discouraged her from applying to schools out of state. That you refused to help her financially once she turned 18. My heart clenched. None of that was true. And she knew it. Eleanor paused again. But the photos, the receipts, the letter, and then her father's voice. I waited. They changed everything. I closed my eyes, silent. "I'm so sorry," she said. "For what she said. For how we treated you. I understand now." I swallowed hard. "Thank you. But I didn't send the letter to clear my name." "I know," she replied. "But it did." Another beat of quiet. Then she added, "My husband and we would like to help you with something. Anything you need. Please don't say no right away." "I'm fine," I said reflexively. "No," she said gently. "You've endured. That's different." Before we hung up, she said one more thing. "She's been quiet since that night. I think she's ashamed." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. After the call, I sat still for a long time, the laundry forgotten. It wasn't just that she'd lied about me. It was that she'd built a version of herself that required me to be the villain. And now that version was cracking. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something deeper. Grief. And maybe, finally, the start of letting go. 3 days after the call, I knocked on her apartment door. I hadn't told her I was coming. I didn't want her to prepare a speech. I didn't want another performance. I just wanted the truth to sit between us, unmasked. She opened the door slowly. She looked smaller, paler, like someone who hadn't slept much. "Mom," she said. Not mother, not Mrs. Rivera. Just Mom. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped aside to let me in. Her apartment was immaculate. Everything in place, not a dish in the sink, not a cushion out of line. But it smelled like something had burned recently. Something covered up too late. I sat on the edge of her white couch. She hovered by the kitchen counter. I assume you got the letter, I said. She nodded. And the message. Her eyes welled. She didn't answer. You didn't thank me, I added, not bitterly. Just plainly. I didn't know what to say, she whispered. That's never stopped you before. That stung. I saw it in the way her shoulders tightened. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean, no, I interrupted. Don't explain. I'm not here for explanations. She looked up, confused. I just came to say one thing, I said. You didn't ruin your wedding. Not with what you said in the kitchen. Not with your speech. You ruined it the moment you sold our story to make yours shinier. She opened her mouth again, but I raised a hand. You lied to people who wanted to love you. You turned me into a cautionary tale because you didn't want to carry the weight of where you came from. Tears were falling now. Silent. I never asked for gratitude, Natalie. But I did expect honesty. And respect. She sat down slowly across from me. Hands folded. Shaking. I didn't think anyone would believe me if I said you were. She trailed off. What? I asked. Loving? Human? No. Extraordinary. The word sat between us like a forgotten gift. I let out a long breath. You don't have to think I'm extraordinary. She wiped her eyes. But I should have known I came from someone who was. For once, she had no defense. Just tears. Just truth. And for the first time in years, I saw no calculation behind her eyes. Only a daughter, ashamed, and a mother too tired to hate her. We sat there in silence for a long time. I stared at the mug on her coffee table, one of those overpriced ceramic ones with a gold rim. It said, Boss Babe, in cursive. I wondered if she believed it. Natalie, I said finally, I'm not ashamed of who I am. She looked up, startled. And neither was your father. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her interrupt. I raised you with scraps. I gave you every piece of my future so you could build your own. And you, my voice didn't crack. It sharpened. You grew up and threw stones at the hands that fed you. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I sold my wedding ring so you could buy textbooks. I cleaned houses so you could live in a dorm and call yourself independent. I lied to friends about my finances so you could have a prom dress that made you feel special. I leaned forward. Don't you dare look at me like I embarrassed you. Not after everything I gave you in silence. Her eyes welled again. I know, she whispered. I know now. No, Natalie. You remember now. There's a difference. She let her face fall into her hands. I don't know why I did it. I thought, maybe if I looked successful enough, people wouldn't ask where I came from. But where you came from, I said gently, was love. She sobbed into her palms, and I let her. Not out of cruelty, out of mercy. I needed her to sit in the truth for once. Not with punishment, but with clarity. When you called me a failure, I continued, you weren't just insulting me. You were erasing the only reason you're even standing upright in this shiny little apartment. She lifted her head slowly. Red eyes, smeared mascara. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did, I said. And that's okay. She blinked, startled. It's okay because now you have to choose what kind of woman you want to become. Not the bride. Not the boss babe. Not the curated version of yourself you show your in-laws. I stood. You have to decide whether you'll spend your life performing or remembering. She stood too, shaky. Can I fix it? That's not my question to answer, I replied. And I meant it. Some debts can't be paid. But they can be acknowledged. And sometimes, that's enough to start again. A week after the wedding, a small cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in soft cursive ink, Mrs. Rivera. Inside was a thank you card, thick paper, gold embossed edges. The kind rich people send when they want their gratitude to feel expensive. But the handwriting was genuine. Dear Mrs. Rivera, I hope this reaches you in peace. I haven't stopped thinking about your words, or your strength, or what it must have taken to sit through that evening and still rise with dignity. I paused. That word, dignity, so often ignored. So rarely praised. Your letter was more than a gesture, it was a mirror. You showed Natalie, and all of us, what real love looks like. What sacrifice sounds like. What a mother really is. Beneath the card was a folded check. I almost didn't open it. I assumed it was symbolic, a small donation to some charity in my name, maybe. Rich people guilt. But when I saw the number, my breath caught. It was more than I had made in 2 years combined. More than I'd ever held in one place. And scrawled below the amount, Eleanor had written, "For the roof you mentioned in your letter. And for everything you carried alone." I pressed the check to my chest. Not because of the money. That was just paper. It was what it meant. That someone had seen me, heard me, and not just someone, his family. The people Natalie had tried so hard to impress were now looking back at me and saying, "We see who you are." I didn't cry. I just stood in my kitchen and let the silence wash over me. Natalie hadn't called. Not yet. But silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like healing. Like time finally doing what it was always meant to do. Soften the edges, clear the fog, make space for something better. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe not. But truth had taken root. And that was more than I ever expected. A week later, I was having coffee on the front porch. The morning was quiet, the sky still streaked with gold. The old rocking chair creaked beneath me as I watched the world wake up. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't mind. These early hours felt clean, before the weight of memory settled in. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. My heart thudded once, loud and slow. I tapped play. At first, nothing. Just soft rustling. Then, breathing. Heavy. Uneven. And then, her voice. Not clear. Not polished. Not like Natalie on stage or at work or among her wealthy new family. This was something else. Just above a whisper, raw and shaking, she said, "I'm sorry." Then silence. And then, sobbing. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind meant for pity. The kind that breaks through from the gut. From somewhere deep. The kind that only comes when you finally see the wreckage you've caused, and realize it's yours to clean. I held the phone to my ear long after the message ended. She hadn't asked for forgiveness. She hadn't tried to explain. She hadn't defended or deflected or begged. She had simply broken. And in a way, it was the most honest thing she'd given me in years. I didn't call back. Not yet. I wasn't being cruel. I just knew the silence between us still had work to do. It had only just started to shape her. Some bridges don't burn. They rot slowly, over time, quietly, painfully, until one day they collapse under the weight of neglect. But if you're lucky and brave, you can rebuild. Plank by plank, word by word, and sometimes, with no words at all. Just the voice of a father from another life. And a mother who stayed, even after being erased. That voicemail didn't fix everything. But it was something. And sometimes, something is the first step toward everything. A few days after the voicemail, I finally deposited the check. I used part of it to hire someone to fix the roof. Not just patch it, really fix it. No more buckets in the hallway when it rained. No more cold drafts sneaking in through cracks in the ceiling. As the workers hammered away above me, I made soup. Potato and leek. David's favorite. The smell filled the house like it used to when Natalie was little and the world felt more manageable. I didn't think about her every hour anymore. Just most hours. The pain wasn't gone, but it had changed shape. It wasn't sharp now. It was rounder, duller, like something you could carry without bleeding. I went back to the garden, too. The weeds had tried to take over while I was wrapped in all that wedding mess. But I pulled them out, one by one. Got dirt under my nails. Let the sun sting my arms. Patty came by with tea and a bag of yarn for the blanket I'd forgotten I was knitting. "You seem lighter," she said, handing me a cup. "Maybe I am," I replied. She smiled. "Has Natalie reached out again?" "No." She nodded, then said something I hadn't expected. "That's okay." And she was right. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. Not waiting for the perfect apology. Not waiting for her to wake up and suddenly love me the right way. Not waiting to be understood, or redeemed, or restored in her eyes. I already had what I needed. David's voice, my truth, and the knowledge that no one, not even your own child, gets to rewrite your story without your permission. That afternoon, when the workers finished and drove off, I stood beneath the new roof and listened. No drips, just stillness, the kind that doesn't feel like absence anymore. It feels like peace. It was a Saturday morning when she came. The air smelled like rain, even though the sky held its breath. I was folding laundry in the kitchen when I heard the knock, 3 soft raps on the front door. I knew it was her before I looked. Something in the quiet, the way the wind paused, like the universe itself was holding its breath. I didn't rush. I walked slowly to the door, wiped my hands on the towel, and looked through the peephole. There she was, Natalie, no makeup, hair in a low ponytail, wearing one of her old college sweatshirts, the one I'd stitched at the sleeve when she thought she'd ruined it. She looked younger, smaller. Her hands were in her pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. Like a girl who used to come home late and wait on the porch because she knew I'd be upset. But this time, I didn't open the door. I just watched. She looked up, straight at the peephole, maybe sensing I was there. She didn't smile, didn't knock again, just stood there, waiting. She stood for a full minute. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She bent down and slipped it under the door. Then she left. No drama, no final plea, just her footsteps on the porch. Then silence. I didn't touch the note right away. I sat back down at the table, finished folding the last towel, then made myself a cup of tea. Only then did I open the envelope. It wasn't long. Mom, I don't know how to make this right. But I know I want to try. I miss you. And that was it. No explanations, no excuses, just 7 lines. But they carried the weight of everything she hadn't said before. I placed the letter on the counter. Didn't cry. Didn't pick up the phone. Because healing doesn't mean rushing back into what hurt you. Sometimes it means sitting with the space. Letting her feel what it's like to knock and wait. To wonder if the door will open. To learn, maybe for the first time, that love is not owed, it is earned. And sometimes, love needs a little time on the porch before it's let back in. It's funny what you remember when the dust finally settles. Not the insults, not the silences, but the moments you almost gave up, and didn't. Like the night she called me from college, crying over a failed exam. I stayed on the phone until sunrise, even though I had work at 7 a.m. Or the time she broke her ankle and begged me not to cry in front of her friends. So I didn't. I waited until I got to the car. Or the Christmas I went without heat so I could buy her the boots she circled in a catalog 3 months in a row. She never remembered those things. But I did. Because that's the kind of love mothers carry. Quiet, heavy, unseen, and yes, sometimes thankless. But never small. I didn't raise Natalie to be perfect. I raised her to be resilient. But somewhere along the way, she confused survival with shame. She wanted her story to be sparkling and smooth, and forgot the gold was in the cracks. She wanted to rise, but didn't realize who built the ladder. Now, maybe she does. Her letter still sits on the counter. I haven't replied, not out of spite, but because I want her to understand. A door doesn't open just because you regret closing it. You have to knock. You have to wait. You have to mean it. And maybe, just maybe, you have to stand in the rain a while, and let the truth soak in. I don't know if she'll come back again. But if she does, I'll be here. Not the same mother she left behind, but the one who stood up, held the mic, and told the truth. For David, for myself, and yes, even for her. Because love doesn't always sound like lullabies. Sometimes it sounds like a father's voice from a dusty recorder. Sometimes it sounds like silence behind a door. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it sounds like your daughter whispering, "I'm sorry," through her tears, even if it's too late for a clean ending. I didn't need to win that night. I just needed to be remembered. And I was.